Welcome back, travelers, to Legendary Lore, where we will be talking today about Wrenn. Yes, Wrenn. Now, you may notice I didn't say 6, 5, 7. I didn't say any of those. I just said Wrenn. That's because as the story opens up, it's Wrenn and 6. They take one step into Innistrad, and then
lose 6. And lose 6.
Yes. She takes a step into Innistrad, and then her body is basically ejected from the tree. So basically the way it works for Wrenn is that the tree itself was from Innistrad. And so she, once it had explored the world with her, also it's worth knowing that Wrenn is a dryad. And so normally dryads are joined to a tree. Wrenn needs to kind of move from tree to tree and forms a symbiotic relationship with them.
Because of her spark?
I'll explain why actually in a bit. But basically, it says right here, somehow it hurt more than that it had when she was parted from 4, who had been injured so badly in battle they had barely been able to complete the last steps together before the old tree had shuddered and expelled her from its heart. So they had apparently heard rumors, and she'd heard rumors in the past, that the finest trees grew in the Kasig forest. And when Wrenn had gone there to investigate and see if she could find something that was nice, she found some really, really good trees, some solid trees. And so she made the decision to always get her trees from Innistrad.
Okay.
And so 6, which was the tree that she had been in prior.
She was introduced to us in.
Yes, it says that 6 could keep going and it could stay with her, but had chosen not to. And the reason that choice is important is because that's basically the entire deal for Wrenn. Wrenn respects the forest. Wrenn respects the trees. It's not hijacking the body of a tree and forcefully turning it into a tree folk. Wrenn listens to the tree's desire. Now, what's important here is that Wrenn can hear them. Not tree folk. These are just normal trees, but Wrenn can hear them.
So Wren's basically a more involved Lorax.
Yes. Now, it says here, the Wrenn sighs and leans her forehead against the bark of the tree and smells a familiar scent of him for the final time. And she says, someday, a very long time from now, when 7 wearies and I have need of my 8, I'll return here. I will walk these woods again, and I will find you, old friend. And your acorns will have had time to grow into strong young trees, and I will offer them the choice I once offered you. And if one of them should accept it, I will consider myself fortunate beyond measure. Because as a tree, it has very, very minute sentience, but when it's attached to her, it has basically will of its own. It becomes a tree folk, essentially. Mm-hmm. So what we have here is her saying goodbye to 6. And she's going on her journey to find 7. And so basically the way it works is that she sings. She listens for a song to respond to her being there. Right? And so as she goes around listening for the song, she can hear one of them. And it's a sapling. And it's the only one singing to her. And she thinks, okay, that's kind of bad because I can't take just a normal tree against its will. It'll reject my body. I'll die. And I can't really take the sapling because it's too small. It will die. And then I'll have to find another tree anyways. But if I find that sapling, at least I can have a bit of a buffer time, right? Then we cut. Now we're at Teferi. And it says Teferi had never visited Innistrad before. And that's why I have put this one after the last one we just had. Because I had the idea of this story taking place after Teferi has already been told to go to Innistrad. This was initially the second story in the series. I have it as the 4th for this reason specifically. Okay. So So Fairy's kind of going around on his own. He's helping people that he can. He's doing like whatever he can for the Cathars that are here hunting witches. Because they had heard stories of a pale witch going through the woods and they were hunting her. And then he hears a woman that she is speaking softly with a voice low and gently pitched with rounded vowels that matched no accent he knew. And so he starts going towards that sound, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he sees her. Her hair is long, loose, and whiter than even she is, bone bleached and stark. And her forehead is resting against one of the trees, and her face is obscured. And he can't quite hear what she's saying. And so he walks towards her with his hands out and open, fingers spread so that there's no symbols or anything he's doing. He's not getting any spells ready, right? And he figures that because she's as pale as possible, that she must be the White Witch. But when he sees her, he doesn't feel like there's any kind of evilness coming from her. There's no ill intent. And he's like, okay, this person probably, like they're going through something. They need my help more than I need to destroy them, basically, right? And so as he approaches her, he steps on a twig and she kind of freaks out and her eyes are wide and she's like pressed up against the tree. And he notices that she's not melding into it, so she's not like going to fight him or anything. So he starts going really close and he goes, "Forgive me the intrusion, but you seem unwell. May I offer aid?" And she does not trust him. She's like, "I can defend myself." And he goes, "I'd rather not fight. It's a dull way of meeting people. The locals are more than battle hungry enough for the both of us. May I assume you came seeking a moment's peace?" And she's like, "I came looking for a tree." And he's like, "You came to the right place."
Like, oh, hey, I found one. And another one. You found one. We did it.
And she's like, "Well, none of these trees are strong enough to hold me." And he goes, "Well, forgive me, but I was under the impression that a dryad was born with their tree and grew in tandem with it and never left it." And she goes, "Well, they are." And she goes, "I mean, we are. I mean, there was a great fire. It devoured the trees of my people until I found a way to pull it into myself. And it burns here still. It burns in me now. It grants me the flexibility to move from tree to tree. And if the tree can contain the fire when it was still new and bright, the inferno led me to a tree whose song knew my own. We came together and we were one." Her expression, "With one, I learned that those of us who have no roots to anchor us can walk as we will, not limited to a single world. And when she was done serving her time as my partner, I allowed her to take root in another world and found another tree to sing with." So basically, Wrenn's spark is what allowed her to be able to take in the wildfire that destroyed her home. She was able to stop it from destroying everything else. And when she bonded with a new tree, one, she was able to, her spark basically ignited at that moment. And so she can only planeswalk if she is bonded with a tree. If she doesn't, she dies. Because if she doesn't bond with a tree, the wildfire inside of her will burn her up like a candle in the wind. And that's basically Wrenn's entire deal. She is trying to stop a wildfire from erupting from her body, and she planeswalks from place to place, showing trees the multiverse. It's such a cool concept to me. I love the design.
I like it.
It's so cool. And it's so fresh. She's not driven by any particular thing beyond exploration, which isn't something you often see in a character in Magic, where she really is just there to see the world. Not like Tamara, who's there to catalog things. Legitimately just to exist. She wants to live. And so she's saying that she needs to travel, and the six grew weary, and this forest was where it came from, and so she asked for it to take her here, basically. And so now she traveled toward it, and so she could go no further. And now she realizes that the fire is probably going to kill her, because the sapling is too far away. She's not close enough to where she needs to be, and she can't go into any of those trees without destroying them. And then while this is happening, then one of the Cathars is like, "I think the mage went this way." And then Dryad's like, "Wait, you were here to kill me, aren't you?" And she just like has fire suddenly start flickering around her.
So she
And
can
he's
wield
like,
the wildfire.
yeah. Well, remember
That's
her
cool.
original card was red-black. I mean, red-white.
Red-green.
Red-green. Red-green. The original card was red-green.
I would have loved her if she was a red-black Dryad Planeswalker would probably be everything I want in the world.
It wouldn't make any sense. It would make literally no sense.
Yeah, that's why it would be everything I want in the world.
And so basically Teferi takes her arm and they walk away from where they currently are. And as they're walking, Teferi realizes they're being followed. And he's like, there's no Cathars nearby, but we're being followed. And she goes, well, it's not just Cathars. It could be something like something dead trying to kill us. And he says, she tells him that anything that's following travelers in the woods without approaching them means no good. So yes, I assume it's trying to hurt us. Then he goes to this, like, he looks at the shadows and he says, show yourself. And the shadows kind of like deepen. And then he says, show yourself again. And I'll just describe it. He flicks his fingers in a quick series of curling, spiraling lines that end with a raise of his hand, the palm pointed toward the deep shadow. The blue light flared from his hand, and when it faded, a figure lurked where the malicious presence had been. It was a warped and twisted parody of a humanoid, caught somewhere at the intersection between man, beast, and tree. Its mouth a gaping maw, filled with angular teeth that had never grown the jaw of anything living.
Did Teferi meet Stick Fingers?
He meets Bigfoot, essentially.
Uh-huh.
And so basically what he does is it's going to attack them. So he just does like real quick time magic that freezes it in place.
Oh, Teferi.
Yeah. Now, Joe, what do you know about Teferi's time magic?
He didn't used to be good with it.
Okay, so here's the deal. As we get through the next of 2022, we're going to go into a lot about how bad Teferi is when it comes to being responsible with his magic.
Oh, like me with my new credit card.
Yeah, exactly. And so he goes, the thing is gone for now. And she goes, so is our path back. Look what you've done, mage. And so when he turns around, he sees that not only did he freeze the creature and completely eradicate any form of understanding of what was happening in front of him, but everything behind them has now been twisted into an Escher painting, basically. There's like 1,000 refracting paths in every direction. And he's like, oh. And she's like, yes, oh. The tree that called me is gone. I can't hear it anymore. Do you know what you've done? And he's like, I don't, which is worrisome. I came here looking for a tree. And can't you take refuge in any of these? And she's like, no! She goes, they're not suitable partners. None of them sing to me. None of them can carry my fire. The tree that called me was a sapling. It was too young and too small to contain it. So we find another tree. So you don't burn into nothing. It doesn't work that way. Dryads walk the world with our trees to keep and anchor us, because my heart is made of fire. When I walk, my tree walks with me. I can have no partner too small, nor can I convince any unsuitable tree to carry me into the world. I must find a tree, and I don't have as much time as I would prefer. And he's like, I will find a way.
So Teferi is actually just a goon.
Well, that's the thing, is Teferi always means well. He just makes mistakes.
Because he's a goon.
He's a goon. He's a fellow goon. And so basically the rest of the story continues. I'm going to skip ahead a bit because it's a lot of them kind of talking. There's some cool bits that I'm
just remembering Teferi's first appearance on the card, the disruptive student.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, he hasn't changed from that. I thought he got so much better from that. He hasn't. He's got a sense of justice, but he's still disruptive.
So what's really cool is that everybody knows who Teferi is, right?
Mm-hmm.
She says, your legend travels farther than your feet. Because Wrenn has heard of Teferi. She didn't know who he was, but she had heard of him. And she says, She goes, none who walk the worlds are innocent. Still, most of your tales have been less than terrible. Many call you a kind man. I will trust you for now. And so Teferi kind of walks with her and she explains to him the way her magic works, how she believes and how she sees magic. And she's like, can you see your spell? And he's like, I can. Like, well, I'll read it because it's actually really cool. So I'm going to skip over some of the bits of them just talking to each other.
Uh-huh.
And then she asks him about the tree song if he can hear it. And he's like, no, I can't hear the tree song. And so they get to a point. They stop in the middle of the path, feeling the time swirling around them. And right on the edge of the working, flavoring without tainting it, was the remainder of the lurking presence. And so he can actually tell where the creature was. So it was right there. And he says that he should have been able to tear this spell down with a second thought. And instead it endured, trapping and taunting them. And so he goes, she sits back and says, I did not envision my story ending this way. And he goes, it's not an ending. If it's a spell gone wrong, surely you've seen spells go wrong. And she goes, yeah. And when it happens, I pick them apart and they dissolve in my hands. He's like, pick them apart? How exactly? Everything that comes from you remains of you forever. The water that passes through the soil into the roots of the tree is still a part of the clouds. The story that maps your footsteps is still a part of who you are. And who you were is forever part of who you are and who you will be. If the spell endures, you can gather it close. Find the places where it became tangled beyond your intentions and pull it into pieces. Those can be released harmlessly, back into the mana that is all things. Is this not how you guys see the roots of magic? And he's like, no. It's usually a much less organic way. She goes, magic lives. Can you see your spell? And he goes, I can. Can you touch it? I can. Can you hold it? No. Your roots are too shallow. Here, I'll help. And so she starts to hum a single note. And the natural magic of the woods swirls around him. Basically, she's ramping for him. She goes, now can you hold it? He goes, I can. Good. You have to remember that you best undo a tangle by moving through it. There's always an entry point, a place where the branches don't quite interlace. Use that to enter its song. Find the place where it fails to find perfect harmony with itself and you can make it. And so she describes seeing things as a song, as natural, right? But what colors does Teferi use?
Blue-white.
Blue-white. And so he's mainly blue. So he uses time magic, which is technically red and blue, but you get the idea of time magic. So he takes a breath and he looks at the distortion and he's looking for the snag and he finds it. A note out of place or failure to harmonize. A second hand ever so slightly out of tune, an hourglass throat, allowing the barest trickle too much of sand. He describes it as in like terms of clockwork, basically.
Why am I imagining these two like a Disney song?
And he describes the thing, time was bent, a smashed clock. And so he starts to do basically slowly unbend the cogs. He starts to basically just parse it out and repair the spell. And as he does it, he feels it go straight, not a tangled, forbidding labyrinth. And the path itself is the exact same way, completely normal. And she says, your legend travels virtuously. You deserve the songs they sing of you. He goes, not all of them. The place I come from originally, Zalfir. I lost it. You lost it? He goes, yes, the entire continent, through a spell much like this one. And everyone else to do what I did. But if we find you in a tree, perhaps, he goes, if our paths meet again. And he's like, yeah, of course, sorry. This is my fault that we're here in the first place. You need to find your tree. And so she can hear the song again. And she approaches the sapling. Now again, Joe, what's so special about Teferi?
Time magic.
Time magic. She approaches the sapling, which is now a mighty mighty tree. The time magic gave it the opportunity to grow into a suitable tree for Wrenn.
He fixed what he did wrong and
He not
made it
only
better.
fixed it, he made it better. He made it to where she could actually, it fully accepted her. And she says, Seven says they're grateful for what you've done, even if you didn't mean to do it. They were calling for me, but thought I wouldn't have the chance to listen. They want to see the worlds. And she goes, your legend travels farther than your feet, but my legend travels only precisely as far. You have my gratitude. And he goes, you have mine for helping me dismantle my own tangle. Then we are well met, mage, and I wish you all peace in whatever you came here to find. The Silver Key. I will aid you if I can in the future, but for now, I have promised Seven lands outside of Innistrad, and I must keep my word. And it says the tree or tree folk or vessel or whatever it had become was still growing, towering above the other oaks, bearing Wrenn away. She waved to Teferi, then leaned back into the trunk behind and around her, closing her eyes. For the first time since entering the woods, Teferi was alone. He smiled at the empty air and turned to go back to the village he had come from. He could tell the Cathar's danger had been dealt with, and he wouldn't be lying. Perhaps this hadn't been the peace he was seeking, but it had been a lesson unsought, and a new ally found. And those things were better than peace. Especially to a man whose feet could travel farther than his legend.
That was amazing.
I loved this story. Teferi is not a new walker, and I believe that is entirely the reason why he's so well written, because we already have his characterization based off of, I'd say, thousands of pages of written work, years of cards. Teferi isn't just a character like Chandra, whose whole deal is red mana character, or Nisa, who is green mana character. Teferi has depth to him. And I feel like that's part of what makes him so cool. That and the fact they paired him with such a different individual from himself in Wrenn.
And we get to get Wrenn's characterization along with Teferi being himself. It was such a good combo. That was amazing.
It was
also,
so
Wrenn just taught a millennium-old man how to do something new.
Yeah, exactly. Something he really should have known.
Yeah. This was so good.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I love it. It was so good.
Wrenn's also really awesome. I love her.
And but the reason that this is why I had this story afterwards, after the second episode, because Teferi's on Innistrad, and I felt like it made sense for that to be the case. Especially
I like the way you did that. Let's not have Teferi going to Innistrad after we had a story of him on Innistrad.
Yeah, pretty much, exactly. But yeah,
that was so good. Thank you guys so much for watching. We're gonna go ahead and catch you guys next time with probably a lamer story, but still probably a good one. So go ahead and tune in for, I guess, the story of Midnight Hunt.
Tomorrow you're gonna find out what Soren does.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
Shh.
Yes.
Don't miss that. Leave a like if you like the video and subscribe to catch it. Bye, guys.